Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before starting the video, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button and give this video a like up. Why Ahmed Johnson is so hated by wrestlers, explained. Believe it or not, Ahmed Johnson at one point was one of the most popular wrestlers in all of WWE. He first debuted in 1995. And sometime later made an impact when he slammed Yokozuna on an episode of Monday Night Raw. While Johnson didn't have much of a gimmick, he was an interesting prospect and WWE had plans to give him a big push. They tried to do just that, but Johnson proved to be injury-prone, and more importantly, nobody really liked him backstage. Many old wrestlers have their own shows and podcasts now, and they often talk about other wrestlers in the business. One thing Ahmed Johnson doesn't have in common with these wrestlers is that nobody says positive things about him, from wrestlers to people with backstage roles in WWE. Today, nobody talks about Ahmed Johnson. Granted, he's been out of the spotlight for decades, but when you look at other wrestlers from the same time, they're more talked about than Johnson. But why's that? Ahmed was popular at one point, and it looked like he was going to become a superstar in WWE, but he's not remembered by most fans today. And even the wrestlers who do talk about him don't usually do it in a positive way. If we look back at Ahmed Johnson's WWE career, he didn't really do anything extraordinary in the long run. His most notable accomplishment, however, is that he did become the first ever African-American Intercontinental Champion in WWE. He won the title belt at the 1996 King of the Ring event by defeating Goldust, the same show where Austin cut his iconic Austin 3:16 promo. He didn't have a long title reign because less than 2 months after winning the belt, Ahmed Johnson developed kidney issues, which forced him to relinquish his title belt and also lose a WWE title opportunity. This wasn't the first time that an injury caused Ahmed Johnson to lose his push in WWE. A few months after his return, WWE tried to give him another push, this time putting him against The Undertaker for the WWE Championship at In Your House, Canadian Stampede. But once again, Johnson got injured and got replaced by Vader at the show. Around this time, Ahmed Johnson had also joined the Nation of Domination after feuding with them for a few months. He was kicked out of the group in August. As was confirmed many decades later, there were real-life issues between Johnson and the rest of the Nation. Ahmed Johnson was never on good terms with the Nation's leader, Farouk. Johnson had developed a reputation for hurting his opponents, and according to Mark Henry, he once injured Farouk's liver due to an errant kick, and it took him almost a year to return. When he returned, he took his revenge on Johnson and broke his ribs. However, this doesn't sound like a legitimate claim because Simmons was never out for 9 months, as Henry claimed, in the same timeline when Ahmed Johnson was also in WWE. Now, if we believe Ahmed Johnson's version of events, it was actually Farouk who hurt him in his debut and kicked his kidney a bit too hard. So when they had their WrestleMania match the next year, Johnson took his revenge on him and broke his ribs and punctured his lungs. He also once feuded with D'Lo Brown of the Nation and was beaten up by him backstage. Johnson even had issues with The Rock and almost fought with him backstage. Johnson once also claimed that Stone Cold Steve Austin was a racist. On his podcast, the Texas Rattlesnake addressed this and said that this was untrue and that he also didn't like Johnson. There were a couple of other wrestlers who also didn't like Johnson. Booker T also commented on him and called him a lying, low-down scum. Booker T claimed that Johnson lied about a lot of things, such as playing for the Dallas Cowboys. Jim Ross once called Ahmed Johnson one of those wrestlers who thought everyone was against him. And that seems to be true because Johnson always complained about being held back by others in WWE. He said Farouk hurt him, and that wrestlers like Mark Henry, Simmons, and The Godfather made up a story about him getting beaten up by Brown. He claimed Henry was jealous of his success in WWE, and that Booker T was jealous of his friendship with Stevie Ray. Johnson also claimed that Shawn Michaels cost him a WWE title match. Ahmed Johnson is still in hot water with many veterans in the business. Going back to Booker T, their feud first began when Booker T was coaching Ahmed, and the latter insisted on performing a powerbomb, but Booker T was against it due to safety concerns. In this case, Johnson's attitude was the real issue for Booker. While there's no doubt that Johnson was a great asset to WWE back in the day, even if for a brief period, there were a ton of issues with his push. Jeff Jarrett on the My World podcast explained it pretty well. Jarrett talked about how merely getting reactions isn't enough in wrestling because at some point, wrestlers will have to put on a show, and WWE can't have someone who can't do their main job as a wrestler. There's also Johnson's refusal to sell other wrestlers' moves, and that's an easy way to get a lot of unnecessary heat on yourself. After 1997, Johnson stayed in the mid-card and left WWE the next year. He cited his sister's cancer and WWE's racist storyline pitch as the reason behind his departure. During a chat with WrestlingNews.co, Johnson talked about this storyline. Apparently, WWE wanted to hang him from a rope, literally, something they'd done one time on television with the Big Boss Man. This was the final straw for Johnson, who didn't want to send a wrong message to the black community, as well as his sister who was battling cancer. I think racism did play its part in it, but not from Vince, from Shawn Michaels, and some of the other boys. I mean, like they did that thing with DX, when Bret Hart and the Hart Foundation and the Nation of Domination was getting into it. And they wrote all that stuff on the wall, that was pushing it for me, and I couldn't have done that. And the thing with the Truth Commission was, what they wanted to do, they wanted him to hang me from a rope. You know how lynching is a very sore subject with black people. They wanted to hang me from a rope. That just wouldn't happen with me, brother. I'll do any other angle, but the rope? No. I didn't want her, his dying sister, to be in her last minutes watching me get beat up. She was a big fan, and then she passed like a day or two after that, after I left, so she would have had to see me get beat up and hung from a rope before she passed. That was not an image I was trying to put out, not for her, not for the black kids out there, to anybody. That is going too far.